The final mortgage payment wasn't a click on a screen. It was the severing of a chain that had been wrapped around my life for 15 long years. Every extra shift, every skipped holiday, every cheap meal eaten standing over the sink had led to this single, silent moment. The confirmation email glowed with 2 words: paid in full. I didn't celebrate with a shout, but with a deep, shuddering breath that felt like the first clean air I'd tasted in a decade. This little house wasn't just wood and plaster. It was my fortress, built with my own sweat and sacrifice. I walked from room to room, my fingertips ghosting over the walls I'd painted, the floors I'd scrubbed. This was more than a property. It was a diary of my struggle. I remembered crying in the hallway after a brutal day at work and dancing in the kitchen when I got a promotion. Every corner held a memory, and now it was all unequivocally mine. To mark the occasion, I decided to host a small dinner for my brother, Tom, and his wife, Amelia. They were the only family I had, and I wanted them to share in this triumph. The evening began with warmth and laughter. Tom, bless him, was genuinely overjoyed for me, crushing me in a bear hug and telling me how proud he was. Amelia's reaction, however, was harder to read. She smiled, but it was a tight, assessing kind of smile. "How wonderful, darling," she said, her eyes scanning the room as if she were taking inventory. "It's so important to have a secure family home, a real base for everyone." Her words seemed innocent, but the way she said "family home" sent a tiny, inexplicable shiver down my spine. A few days later, Amelia's strange sentiment began to take a more concrete form. My phone buzzed with a text from her, a picture of a monstrous chintz armchair. The message read, "Saw this and thought it would be perfect for the family snug. We need to make it more comfortable for when we all gather." I stared at the phone, baffled. I didn't have a family snug. I had a living room, one that I had meticulously decorated to my own taste. I typed back a polite, "Thanks for thinking of me, but it's not quite my style." The reply was instantaneous. "Oh, don't be silly. It's not about your style anymore. It's about creating a welcoming space for the family. Tom and I can drop it off on Saturday." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a directive. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I was firm in my next text, explaining again that I wasn't looking for new furniture. The conversation ended with a clipped "fine" from her, but the tone was one of a monarch who had been momentarily thwarted, not a sister-in-law who had been politely declined. That Saturday, they arrived unannounced anyway. Tom had the decency to look embarrassed, but Amelia was beaming, holding a large, gaudy vase. "A housewarming gift," she announced, striding past me as if she owned the place. "For the family room. You really need to start thinking of this house as more than just your little project. It's a family asset now, a legacy." The phrase "family asset" landed like a slap, turning my triumph into something that was suddenly up for negotiation. The term "family asset" became Amelia's new mantra. It was a carefully chosen phrase designed to chip away at my ownership, to dilute my 15 years of solitary effort into a communal achievement. I tried to speak to Tom, hoping he would act as a bridge of sanity. He just shuffled his feet, avoiding my gaze. "She's just excited, that's all," he mumbled. "She's a big believer in family sticking together. She sees your success as our success." Her idea of sticking together, however, seemed to involve her making all the decisions. The following week, she called me with an announcement. "Good news! I've found a wonderful gardener who can sort out that mess you call a back garden. He can start on Monday. It'll be lovely to have a proper space for family barbecues." She hadn't asked. She had informed. The sheer audacity of it left me momentarily speechless. "Amelia, no," I said, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "You can't hire people to work on my house. The garden is my project, and I like it the way it is." A cold, brittle laugh came down the phone line. "Don't be so precious. It's an embarrassment. What will people think? This house reflects on all of us now. It's time you accepted that. The simmering tension finally boiled over one Friday evening. I was settling down with a book when my doorbell rang insistently. I opened it to find Amelia and Tom on the doorstep, flanked by two large suitcases. Amelia's expression was one of triumphant resolve. Tom just looked miserable. A cold dread washed over me. "What's this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Our landlords decided to sell," Amelia said breezily, making a move to push past me. "It's terribly short notice, and it just makes perfect sense for us to come here. It's fate, really. The house being paid off just in time for us to need it." The lie was so audacious, so perfectly constructed to sound reasonable, that it almost worked. She was presenting it as a happy coincidence, a neat solution for everyone. "Move in?" I stammered, my mind struggling to catch up. "You can't just move in, Amelia. This is my home." Tom finally found his voice, a pathetic, pleading murmur. "Just for a bit, sis. Just till we find our feet." But Amelia cut him off with a sharp glare. "Don't apologize, Tom. This is a family home. We are family. This is what family does. We support each other." Her definition of support, it seemed, was unilateral. A primal instinct for self-preservation kicked in. "No," I said. The word was quiet but unshakable. "I'm sorry about your situation, but you are not moving in." Amelia's carefully constructed composure shattered. Her face twisted into an ugly sneer. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "After all the support we've given you? All the encouragement?" I stared at her, utterly bewildered. "What encouragement? I did this alone. I worked day and night while you two were on holidays I couldn't afford." She let out a derisive snort. "And we were your emotional support. We were your reason to keep going, to build something for the family. You are being unbelievably selfish. This is what happens when you have no husband or children. You don't understand the meaning of family." The argument was raw and vicious. Tom stood by, a silent, spineless statue. "My answer is final," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "You need to leave now." Amelia's eyes blazed with a furious fire. "You will regret this," she vowed. "You are choosing a pile of bricks over your own family. You will end up old and alone in this empty house." She grabbed Tom's arm and stormed off, leaving the suitcases on my path like a declaration of war. The suitcases remained on my lawn for 2 days, a public monument to my family's dysfunction. I called Tom, but my calls went straight to voicemail. Finally, I sent a simple text. "Collect your things by 5 p.m. or they're going to a charity shop." An hour later, his car pulled up. He looked haggard as he loaded the cases, refusing to meet my eye. "You don't understand," he said, his voice thick with despair. "She truly believes she has a right to be here. She's convinced herself that because you're single, you don't need all this space, and that it's your family duty to share it." I felt a flicker of pity for my brother, but it was extinguished by my own sense of violation. "She has no right, Tom, and you're a coward for not telling her that." He flinched as if I'd struck him. "It's not that simple," he whispered. "She's been talking to people, getting advice. She says there are precedents for this kind of thing, unofficial family arrangements." The implication was terrifying. Amelia wasn't just throwing a tantrum. She was strategizing. She was willing to twist reality and the law itself to get what she wanted. All because she couldn't stand to see me have something that was solely mine. The solicitor's letter that arrived the following week was a work of pure fiction. It was filled with legal jargon that twisted our history into an unrecognizable shape. It spoke of verbal commitments and familial investments, claiming that Tom and Amelia had provided significant non-financial support towards the upkeep of the property with the understanding that it would serve as a multi-generational family home. It was a calculated, malicious lie designed to intimidate me. My own solicitor, a sharp, sensible woman named Mrs. Davies, read the letter, and snorted. "This is speculative nonsense," she assured me. "She has no legal standing whatsoever. But that doesn't mean she won't try to make your life a living hell. People like your sister-in-law are bullies. They rely on you being too scared or too tired to fight back." She advised me to change my locks and install a video doorbell immediately. The act of turning my home into a fortress against my own brother's wife felt like a profound failure. The joy of ownership was being tainted by fear and suspicion. Every time the post arrived, my stomach clenched. The home that was meant to be my sanctuary now felt like the front line of a war I never wanted to fight. Amelia, thwarted by legal reality, switched to a more insidious tactic: emotional blackmail. She began a systematic campaign to turn our extended family against me. She would call our aunts and cousins crying, telling them a heavily edited version of the story where I, drunk on my newfound wealth, had cruelly cast my struggling brother and his wife out onto the street for no reason. The phone calls started trickling in. "Darling, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding," one aunt said, her voice laced with disapproval. "Family has to come first." Each call was a fresh ordeal, forcing me to defend my right to my own home, to explain the ugly truth of Amelia's entitlement. Some believed me, but others were swayed by Amelia's dramatic performance. She was isolating me, painting me as the cold-hearted villain of the family. Her campaign extended to social media, where she posted vague, pity-seeking statuses. "A house is not a home when there's no room for family in your heart," she wrote, to a chorus of sympathetic comments from people who had no idea of the truth. I was being publicly shamed by the very people I was supposed to be able to count on, and the weight of it was crushing. One evening, there was a hesitant knock at my door. I checked the video doorbell and saw Tom, standing alone and looking utterly defeated. I let him in, and he collapsed onto my sofa, burying his face in his hands. "I can't take it anymore," he choked out. "She's obsessed. It's all she talks about. This house. She spends her days looking at it online, making plans. She's driving me mad." He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Please, just let us stay in the spare room for a month. Just 1 month. That's all I'm asking. If you do this, I promise she'll drop all this legal nonsense. We can fix this." He was begging, and a part of me, the part that still loved the boy he used to be, wanted to give in just to make it all stop. But I saw the trap. 1 month would become 2, then 6, then forever. Giving in wouldn't fix anything. It would just prove to Amelia that her bullying worked. "I can't, Tom," I said softly. "You know I can't." He slumped back in defeat, and then he said the words that changed everything. "We're going to lose everything," he whispered. "We're in so much debt. This house, she sees it as our only way out." The confession opened the floodgates. Tom laid out a pathetic story of years spent living beyond their means, all to fuel Amelia's desperate need to appear successful. They had secret credit cards, high-interest loans, and a mountain of debt that was about to come crashing down on them. Their landlord wasn't selling. They were being evicted for 6 months of unpaid rent. The suitcases on my doorstep hadn't been a tactic. They had been a desperate final gamble. The revelation was sickening. They hadn't just been entitled. They had been deceitful on a scale I could barely comprehend. They had tried to manipulate me, to emotionally blackmail me, to legally intimidate me, all to make me the solution to a problem of their own making. My 15 years of sacrifice were meant to be their lifeline, a prize they felt they were owed. "Why didn't you just ask for help?" I asked, my voice cold and distant. "Why the lies?" Tom couldn't meet my eyes. "Amelia's pride," he mumbled. "She couldn't bear for anyone to know we'd failed. She thought if we just moved in, we could sort things out quietly, and you'd never have to know how bad it was." The arrogance was staggering. They wanted to use my home as a shield to hide their shame. I told Tom to leave. I gave him the number for a debt charity and told him I loved him. but that I would not allow him to drag me into the mess he and his wife had created. He left looking like a ghost, and I felt the final, frayed thread of our sibling bond snap. The next day, I had my solicitor send a formal cease and desist letter to Amelia, warning her against any further contact or harassment. Amelia's response was to escalate. 2 days later, a van from a furniture rental company pulled up outside my house. I watched in horror as 2 men started to unload a sofa, a dining table, and several boxes. Amelia was standing on the pavement, directing them towards my front door. She had ordered furniture to be delivered to my address, a brazen attempt to physically force her presence into my home. I met the delivery men on the path, my cease and desist letter in hand. "There's been a mistake," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "Nothing is being delivered to this address. This woman does not live here and she is harassing me." I showed them the letter. After a confused call to their head office, they loaded everything back onto the van and drove away, leaving Amelia standing on the pavement, her face a mask of pure fury. The failed furniture delivery seemed to push Amelia over the edge. Her harassment became more personal, more unhinged. She started leaving rambling, abusive voicemails from blocked numbers. Then came the anonymous, malicious reviews of my workplace online, filled with lies about my character and professionalism. It was a vicious, cowardly campaign designed to attack me from all sides. I felt like I was under siege. I documented every call, every online post, and forwarded it all to Mrs. Davies. She was building a case for an injunction, but the legal process was slow, and in the meantime, I was living in a state of constant anxiety. The peace I had worked so hard for had been stolen, replaced by a gnawing fear of what she would do next. The lowest point came when she tried to turn my neighbors against me. She went from door to door with a fabricated story about how I was a cruel landlord, illegally evicting my sick brother from the property. Thankfully, my neighbors, who had seen my car leave for work at dawn and return at dusk every day for years, knew better. They politely told her to leave, and one of them, a kind, older gentleman, came over to tell me what had happened and to offer his support. The final desperate act came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was on a conference call for work when my video doorbell pinged. I glanced at my phone and my blood ran cold. It was Amelia, and she was with a man who was holding a toolbox, a locksmith. She was pointing at my front door, talking animatedly. She was actually trying to have my locks changed. I ended my work call abruptly, my heart hammering in my chest. I used the doorbell's two-way talk feature. "Get away from my door!" I yelled, my voice echoing from the small speaker. The locksmith jumped back in surprise. Amelia was momentarily stunned before she launched into a tirade, screaming at the doorbell that it was her house, that I was a squatter who had locked her out. The locksmith, a sensible-looking man, was already backing away. "Sorry, love," he said, shaking his head. "This is a domestic dispute. I'm not getting involved." As he walked away, I called the police. I told them a woman who had been served with a cease and desist letter was actively trying to break into my home. I had it all on video. The arrival of the police was swift. They found Amelia still on my doorstep, drenched and ranting. When they questioned her, she fed them the same lies she had fed everyone else. But I had proof. I showed them the video footage from the doorbell, the solicitor's letters, the log of harassing calls. The evidence was undeniable. They cautioned her for harassment and attempted breaking and entering, and served her with a formal notice to stay away from my property, warning her that any breach would result in her immediate arrest. Watching her being spoken to by the police, seeing her entitlement finally collide with real-world consequences, was not triumphant. It was just deeply, profoundly sad. She looked small and pathetic, a woman consumed by her own greed and delusion. That night, the house was quieter than ever. The threat had been neutralized, but the emotional damage was immense. I had been forced to defend my home not from a stranger, but from my own family. The victory felt tainted, the silence heavy with the ghosts of the relationships that had been destroyed. The legal system, spurred into action by the police report, moved quickly. A week later, I was granted an injunction, a legally binding restraining order. It was a stark, black-and-white document that forbade Amelia from coming within 500 yards of me, my home, or my workplace. It felt like a shield, a piece of paper that finally gave me permission to breathe again. The day the order was granted, Tom called me. He sounded like a broken man. "She's gone," he said, his voice hollow. "She packed her bags this morning. Said I was a weak failure who cost her a home. She blamed me for everything." The news didn't bring me any satisfaction, only a deep, weary sadness for my brother. He had made his choices, and now he was living with the consequences. "I'm sorry, Tom," I said, and I meant it. "I hope you can find a way to move forward." We hung up, and I knew it was the end of a chapter. The toxic trio of me, Tom, and Amelia was finally irrevocably over. I was on my own, but I was free. The months that followed were a period of slow, deliberate healing. I reclaimed my home, not just as a physical space, but as an emotional one. I held a housewarming party for my friends, the real celebration I should have had in the beginning. We filled the rooms with laughter and music, chasing away the bad memories and creating new, joyful ones. I started working on my garden, the one Amelia had called an embarrassment. I found a deep sense of peace in tending the soil, in nurturing new life. As the flowers began to bloom, I felt myself blooming alongside them. The house was no longer a source of conflict, but a source of comfort. My safe harbor in a world that had felt stormy for too long. The video doorbell remained, a silent testament to the battle I had won. Sometimes I would look at it and remember the fury and the fear. But increasingly, I looked at it with a sense of pride. It was a symbol of my resilience, a reminder that I had faced down a bully and protected what was mine. 1 year after the final mortgage payment, I received a letter with an unfamiliar postmark. It was from Tom. My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't a plea for money or a request for forgiveness. It was an apology. 12 pages, handwritten, detailing his shame, his regret, and his dawning understanding of the damage he had allowed to happen. He wrote that he had moved to a different part of the country, had a steady job, and was in therapy, working through the issues that had made him so passive and weak. He said he didn't expect a reply, but he needed me to know that he was truly sorry. He had failed me as a brother, and he would live with that regret for the rest of his life. I cried as I read it. Not for the brother I had lost, but for the man he was finally trying to become. I folded the letter and put it away in a drawer. It was a form of closure, a final, quiet note at the end of a tumultuous symphony. Life found a new, peaceful normal. My home was my sanctuary, a place filled with books, music, and the smell of baking. It was a reflection of me, of my journey, of my survival. The conflict with Amelia had changed me, but not in the way she had intended. It hadn't broken me. It had forged me. It had taught me the steel in my own spine. I learned to cherish my solitude, to see it not as loneliness, but as a precious, self-sufficient peace. I had built this life entirely on my own, and I had defended it on my own. The sense of empowerment that came with that knowledge was more valuable than any property deed. Sometimes a car would slow down outside, and my heart would give a familiar lurch, but the fear would pass quickly, replaced by a calm resolve. I was safe here. This was my space. No one could take it from me ever again. One afternoon, I was clearing out some old boxes and found a photo of Tom and me as children, grinning gap-toothed at the camera. I felt a pang of sadness for the simple, uncomplicated love we once shared. I wondered where he was and if he was okay. I hoped that he had found a measure of peace, just as I had. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about condoning what had happened. It was about letting go of the anger, not for their sake, but for mine. I couldn't change the past, but I could refuse to let it poison my future. The scar of what they had done would always be there, but it no longer hurt to the touch. I put the photo back in the box. It was a part of my story, a part of who I was. The story of a woman who worked for 15 years to build a home and then had to fight for another year to keep it. A story of betrayal, but ultimately, a story of strength. My home is quiet now. It's a happy quiet, filled with the gentle hum of the fridge and the ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. It is the sound of peace, a peace that I earned twice over, once with labor and once with courage. This house is more than just a paid-off asset. It is a symbol of my independence and my resilience. The ordeal taught me a hard lesson, that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most can be the ones who try to take the most from you. It taught me that no is not a dirty word, and that boundaries are not selfish, they are essential for survival. My story is a testament to the fact that you have a right to the life you have built. I am the sole, undisputed queen of my small castle. And while it has no moat and no drawbridge, its walls are strong, built of self-respect and hard-won peace. It is my sanctuary, and I will cherish it always. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to fight for your own peace, I hope this gives you strength. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories. You are not alone.